Good evening, Claire. It is so cool to see you in your New York City apartment. How has your day been?
It's been good. It's been a very full day of rehearsals and yeah, just yeah, rehearsals mainly took up all of the day.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. We'll build some suspense for a few seconds and not let people know what those rehearsals are. But I will start to give a hint because I had to properly fangirl for this experience because it is truly such an honor to speak with you. I've got my sweatshirt on for the occasion. I was like, am I gonna be that corny? I was like, yes, I think I am. So this is Claire Kretzschmar, soloist dancer with the New York City Ballet, straight from Lincoln Center. Um, and you're rehearsing for, I'm guessing, the Nutcracker.
Yes, and actually it's interesting though because we at least I am rehearsing more for other things right now than the Nutcracker. So, just right now because we are prepping for what's coming ahead and making a new ballet. So, that takes more time often than doing a ballet that has already been made. But we are bottom line as a company rehearsing a lot for the Nutcracker, and I do a few. I would say maybe like a few hour, maybe like 2 hours a day or an hour or so of Nutcracker rehearsals at least.
That's wild. From what I understand, it's not your first time at the Nutcracker Rodeo, so maybe those ones are starting to be embedded in your brain waves or whatever those are called. But I'm excited to learn more about the timelines of those ballets and your work there. But I will take a step back. First, I want to ask you. We talked about sipping tea during this conversation. It's like that. What tea are you sipping?
I have a ginger tea.
Ooh, so cozy.
Very cozy. It's very cozy.
That's awesome. Is that part of your kind of routine at the end of a crazy ballet day to have some ginger tea?
Yeah, often it is. I'm not like super regimented with like exactly the kind of beverage I have at the end of the day or like food, but I have a little tea box in my kitchen, and if time allows, if I am at home in the evening, I do like to finish with tea so that I just like it. I think warm beverages are always fun, and it does help me to wind down, though, I will say.
It's so nice. And I'm needing to add more warm beverages to my routine. I start the day with a smoothie that I really enjoy, but it's been so cold in the mornings lately that I'm like, I can't I have to drink it with a blanket on. And then I'm like, how am I going to get ready for the rest of the day? I'm freezing. So we might need to switch things up and get some ginger tea into my routine too. Um, so I will backtrack a little bit more now. I'd love to understand a bit more about, growing up, what it was like for you, Claire, and where you were and how this dance interest ultimately led you to New York City.
Yeah. Um, so I grew up in North Carolina, and started dancing just like at home, really. And I would create dances with my sister most often. We would dance a lot to the Nutcracker. That was one of I think that was the first ballet that we saw. We may have seen New York City Ballet's Nutcracker on video before seeing any other live performances. I'm not exactly sure. But I started taking formal dance classes when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I did jazz, I did tap, I did ballet. Eventually, when I was about like maybe somewhere around like 9 or 10 years old, I started to do more ballet, focus on that. I had a few teachers who really steered me in the right direction. I still continue to do the other styles, but really focused on ballet. I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts summer program and learned more about different styles, about Balanchine, actually. That was one of the initial exposures to George Balanchine's choreography, who founded New York City Ballet, and created so many incredible ballets for the company, including the Nutcracker. Um, but Yes, so encountered George Balanchine's wonderful style when I was at North Carolina School of the Arts in the summer program. I eventually went to the North Carolina School of the Arts for high school, where I did both academics and ballet training all on one campus.
Mhm.
And that was a real gift. And I realized looking back that that's not something that a lot of dancers in general had or have today, is like everything is right there in the same physical space. Um, and like you would walk between buildings and go from like geometry to rehearsal for the Nutcracker or a modern dance class or a point class. So that was really special to be able to go there, and also to live at home. Like I lived at home in North Carolina with my parents and with my brother and sister all growing up until I moved away when I was a senior in high school. And so to back up a little bit, I went to the School of American Ballet summer programs when I was in high school. So this is after going to the North Carolina School of the Arts summer program, after beginning high school at North Carolina School of the Arts. And but during my high school years, I would go up to New York and come to the School of American Ballet, which is the school that feeds into New York City Ballet. And there is where I fell in love. Like if I got a taste in North Carolina School of the Arts, I fell in love with the George Balanchine technique and style. The kinds of dances that we got to practice in the classes. We got to practice some of the steps from ballets that New York City Ballet dancers do, and fell in love with that. Um, Eventually stayed in New York City for my senior year of high school to attend the School of American Ballet for the full year round program. And um, I was going to return for a second year at School of American Ballet. So this would have been after I graduated from high school. And I did that, but in shortly after returning to School of American Ballet for my second year, I was offered an apprenticeship position with New York City Ballet.
Mhm.
And I was actually asked, like Peter Martins, who was the director at the time, asked me and another dancer, like, would you like to join? And of course we said yes, but I always remember like that was a really beautiful thing that he asked.
Yes.
Anyway, so in October of 2010 is when I joined New York City Ballet as an apprentice. I was fortunately hired as a full-fledged member in August 2011. So apprenticeship year is kind of like an internship year or a testing out year to see
Mhm.
if you are a good fit for the company. And fortunately, the director thought so, and I stayed on after that. And um, lots of things have happened in the midst, but I was promoted to soloist in 2018, and I've been doing the same things ever since, like dancing. I mean, new choreography, dancing different roles, and but still in the same company, which is a big gift, because I've been able to be rooted in New York City, and I go, for the most part, I go to the same place every day to work, and
The
I'm really,
same gorgeous, wonderful, inspiring place.
yeah, definitely, definitely Lincoln Center.
That's amazing. I think it's such a beautiful like chronology to this point, and also like you said, so cool to be growing with an organization and seeing what that change looks like, especially in the past year. I know like even as a an audience member, seeing how New York City Ballet adapted to not having an audience was really like pivotal, but there's so many cool nuggets that you like mentioned there that I want to make sure we don't like miss the chance to kind of dive into. Um, so you talked about a few of the different like privileges you had of being able to stay with your family, of like having a school where the ballet was part of the school, makes me think that those are not normally the case for a ballerina. Can you talk a little bit about like, the traditional path versus like the kind of things you were able to do in North Carolina?
Yes. So, um, a lot of this is like from what I just hear about other dancers' experiences.
Mm.
And it is that like we require so many hours of rehearsals, of classes, of training in order to be able to do what we do as ballet dancers that often school schedules conflict or with the dance classes, or it can be a lot of stress on the parents of a child or of children who have many different interests and activities, um, that the dancer often will be like homeschooled or do some kind of online schooling at a certain point
Mm.
in their life. And I think what was great for me was that I got to like go to a school and receive academic classes and also the dance classes without having like too many crazy commutes. Um, so yeah, and then I got to be with my family because a lot of students, when they become more serious, they go off to a boarding school, and
Wow.
sometimes that's like a state away, and sometimes that's like across an ocean. Um, but I like my parents happened to move to this town that had this amazing dance program, an art school, and that was just a huge gift, like nothing that we ever planned, but it was just great. So I hope that kind of
Yeah,
answers.
for sure. I wonder in this journey, like, was it a sort of gradual realization? You're like, okay, I'm gonna be a professional dancer. Like, I'm gonna put my whole life into pursuing this. Or was there, like a conversation with your parents that you remember where you're like, I think we're gonna lean into this as a family? Like, was that hard? Were they on board? Like, what was that like for you?
My parents were always on board, but at the same time, they have two other kids who had different interests, and they wanted to make sure that each child like received like equal love and also cultivation of their own gifts. So like my parents weren't about to like dive in and just like change everyone's lives for the sake of my ballet career. Um, but at the same time, we were like, if as I like recall as best I can, we would have conversations, and they would definitely, sometimes I would resist, but they would kind of steer me in one direction. They would also listen to the teachers of the school, the North Carolina School of the Arts, which is where I was going to, but also teachers that I've had from past experiences. They took those like words into account in making decisions about where I should go for training and what I should do. Um, but yeah, it was a real gift to be able to stay at home, because for a lot of people though, they do kind of dive in and like change the family dynamics in order to help the dancer of the family thrive, which is beautiful. But fortunately, we were able to work it out where I could, uh, yeah, still be in the family, and the family could be rooted somewhere. And eventually, I they sent me on my way, but they were supportive. And to get back to your question too, was it a gradual or like a more stark moment? For me, it was very gradual. Like I just my parents and I kept taking the next step.
Mm.
We didn't yeah, we none of us knew what the ballet world entailed. I barely realized that you could be a professional ballet dancer like as your job. It's
Yeah.
still something that gives me so much awe today that that is our job. Um, but I just kept taking the next step. Like when School of American Ballet offered me a position in the summer program, I took it, and when they offered me a position at the year-round program, I said yes. Um, yeah, same thing with New York City Ballet. That's been huge honor to join New York City Ballet. Um, but yeah, we barely knew as a family what we were getting into, but at the same time, we had clarity with taking those steps to eventually make the gradual transition to the professional ballet dancer life.
That's so awesome. It's so nice to have those two parents who are kind of in your corner and like thinking about, the bigger picture in a way that only a parent can, is really special. Um, so I think it's really cool how you did go to this like school of the arts and you had these gradual progressions of leaning more and more into this professional world. I don't have the experience of going to a performing arts school, but I remember like even in the search for high schools, like my family and I thinking about like, is this going to be a collaborative environment, a competitive environment? Like, are you going to be so stressed here that like you're not going to be able to really be your full self? And I think, maybe being at home really, you mentioned like being rooted. And I think of like, I was thinking of the word like grounding. Like, was that helpful to that? Like, did you, get to reckon at all with how you are your best self in an environment that is like very grown up, maybe in some ways, with people who are at such a young age already pursuing their dreams?
Yes, I mean, I think back to those days. I wouldn't change them because I do think that just being at home uh spared me of a lot of stress from being away from home and trying to become a ballet dancer.
Mhm.
Um because I mean there were so many nights, days where I could just um, rest, like in my family setting, unpack the day's adventures, and also not talk about them, because that was really healthy, not to overanalyze any of the like perfectionist moments that we have as ballet dancers. So I think in many ways it was just nice to have like a, a comfortable, stable family unit to go back to every night and like reset and refresh, and then to have their support, because we it takes a lot of courage and uh, dedication to train as an artist in any form, and to have the support like in your home is really helpful. And to again to be spared like leaving the nest so soon
Mhm.
just allowed me to feel yeah, just deeply connected with my family and also my community in North Carolina before jumping into a new boat.
Yes, a little bit of nurturing is like so helpful when we can have that as part of our story. And I think what like I imagine could be really cool in that situation is like having their perspective. Like people like you can maybe get so wound up in a specific world if it's all you're seeing, but the fact that like your parents are not, they didn't go to that school, like they're doing their own thing in this outside world is kind of maybe affirming that like there are other options if we don't end up wanting to do this. For me, like on my like worst days, I'll call my mom and be like, I just want to quit everything. I just want to come home. And she'll just kind of like let me, kind of say that, like fully knowing that it's very slim chance that I'm actually going to go forward and do it. But remembering that like your family loves you for the things that are not like your craft is just I think, has really made a difference for me. And maybe that's helpful in those competitive kind of situations.
Totally. So, yeah, perspective is so important.
So
Like,
important.
yeah.
We could talk about it probably all day. But I love, in thinking about the next step of your trajectory, you went to New York City for your senior year of high school. And that's a really, unique opportunity. You're there without your family. Do you have any special memories from that time? Like, had you been to the city before at all, or did you just like, okay, so you had been before? That helps.
Yeah, I had been not a few times when I moved up there eventually. But I mean, so one of the things that I look back on fondly is that like the my second year that I returned, I had this amazing, well, to me, it was amazing, an amazing dorm room that looked over Lincoln Center. So I was on the 15th floor of a building that looked like just towards the all of the opera house, the David H. Koch Theater where we perform, and the Philharmonic building, and the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. And so it was just so cool every night to return to that like really small single person, like it was just for one dorm room. And every night, I like before I would go to bed, I could just sit in the windowsill and look out at that amazing view that I will probably never have ever again. Like in some ways that felt like my the most expensive dream apartment because I had that view that was so beautiful. So that's a memory that I have of like being away from home, and but also finding comfort in the beauty of the arts little center right there.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. I mean, there were a lot of community building activities we did. Like, I remember we made gingerbread houses. It always excited me to go to a family's home
Yes.
that would invite me in because we, we're eating cafeteria food and it wasn't terrible, but when you're kind of doing that day in and day out, I remember when different like parents that I just encountered at the school would invite me into their home or take me out to dinner. That felt so special. So I kind of had these parents who adopted me in a way in New York City, which that was really special. I remember sledding, like experiencing big snowstorms.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and then also like the performing and rehearsing, and really mainly when I went to SAB for the year, like the School of American Ballet, it was a lot of classes. We did a lot of classes,
Mhm.
which were great. But like one of the highlights for me was getting to do our performances at the end of the year. And I had two parts that I absolutely loved. And it felt really big to perform in New York City. Like I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, I'm performing in New York City. That was it. That was just like pure joy and nerves, of course. But yeah, those are a few little memories from my time away.
Yes, that's so cool. I go to I'm in grad school right now, and my understanding is that like the football players get to have the dorms that are like overlooking the stadium, but I would definitely choose the ballerinas dorms overlooking Lincoln Center instead. That is pretty epic. And when you were talking about those like just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm here, this is happening moments, it reminded me of and I don't know if you've ever seen Gilmore Girls, but Rory's like high school graduation, her mom brings her back into Chilton, and they have this moment on the stairs. They're just like quiet, and they're like, this used to be scary to you, and now it's like you've like succeeded here. And I can't imagine what it would be like to have goosebumps on a stage in New York City where you've like accomplished an important step in your dream. That just must have been so wow.
Definitely. Yeah. I love thinking back to those days and just remembering yeah, the awe and the excitement that I experienced. Yeah.
Yes. So, you mentioned this apprenticeship at the New York City Ballet as like the important step sort of that came next. Are apprenticeships a standard like part of becoming part of a ballet family? Was that, is it like just one option of a way of joining a ballet family? Can you speak more about what those are?
Yes. I think it is a pretty common practice for ballet companies to have some kind of internship, apprenticeship position. Sometimes they have, like, sometimes bigger companies will have a second company, which is a smaller company subset of the bigger company. And that's where you go for, I would say, like the finishing touches of your training, and also getting to perform more. and seeing what that's like. But I would say it's pretty common for companies to have some kind of apprenticeship program. The length of time may vary. I know that New York City Ballet, generally, it's about a year. Um, Other places it might be different. But yes, that is something that seems to be pretty standard across the board. It's just done in different ways.
Very cool. It's kind of a way for you both to feel out, what is this place and how am I going to work here? How are they going to work with me kind of thing. So I remember, I think from when we were getting to know each other, you mentioned, the Balanchine style as being kind of what sealed the deal of your love maybe for ballet and for New York City Ballet. Can you speak more about, that style versus other styles and the fact that there are styles even? I don't know if that's like common knowledge.
Yeah. So yes, ballet has different styles, and the Balanchine style is it has, I would say, a distinct musicality. A lot of our steps are, I would say, generally faster than, I would say they are done more quickly than like maybe another classical style where the steps are a little more done slower and in a more placed fashion, whereas the Balanchine style, we still like place our feet, we place our hands, we place our head, we place everything. I shouldn't say that we don't do that, but there's a great like dynamic quality to our dancing where we emphasize, like we really um, emphasize the distinction between moving down into like what's called a plie, where you bend your knees, and then like either jumping or like being on point for ladies. um, so there's this great dynamic quality and like simultaneous musicality in the Balanchine technique that I think is really key. And then with that too, George Balanchine exaggerated certain positions and he just made them longer, he made them bigger. To give you an example, like classical dancers will turn with a like a round arm, and like they do a pirouette from this position with a round arm. And
Wow.
George Balanchine like extended the arm so that like we pirouette with an extended arm and an extended leg in the back, and then we like kind of do a like a spiral up into a turn. Whereas the more classical techniques, they have they have bent two bent knees, and they have a round arm before they pirouette. It works like in a very similar way, but George Balanchine like loved the long lines, um, and the beauty of that, so that he incorporated um, more of those extensions into his style. And I should say that George Balanchine, he comes from Russia, where classical ballet was like well formed, and there's a very beautiful legacy that comes from Russia. And so he had classical roots. He just wanted to shape them in order to um, help this style that he was creating serve the ballets that he wanted to create. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, because he had a vision. He had a vision and wanted to shape American ballet.
Yes, I love how you're able to marry your like practice of it with this really rich history and understanding of like where it comes from and the differences. And um, it makes me curious about, so I think it's in your education you were taking classes in like actually performing the works, but you were taking like history classes as well. I know in my social work education, the classes that we often gripe about the most are like our research ones, because we're really here for the practice. Like, I really want to go in front of the humans and do the thing. But doing that research and like understanding the context is really helpful. What what is a ballet history class like? Were you writing, papers about Balanchine in Russia and his inspiration? Like, and does it carry through? Is it helpful right now to you?
Well, I actually never had a ballet history class. I only had like history classes, but it is like researching ballet's history is something that I've done in my spare time
Mm.
and overtime. Like I, um, yeah, whenever a new ballet comes up in New York City Ballet repertoire, or when I was a student, I would learn a little bit, at least a little bit about it. I can't say I always learned like an encyclopedia's like
Mm.
amount of knowledge about the ballet, but I learned a little bit about it. Um, yeah, and honestly, like knowing about ballet's history and the New York City Ballet has been something that I've just learned over time. And in starting to teach more, I felt like it just came naturally that in order to teach people about what we do and the style, I needed to and wanted to know about the legacy. So I actually never took a ballet history class, although I imagine that people who have would write papers. I bet they would write papers.
Yes,
Yeah.
but you have so many other ways that you put knowledge into the world that reach the most amazing audiences. So that's not to say that we all need to be writing papers about ballet's history to make an impact. I think that's really wonderful. Um, so, with this Balanchine style, I'm kind of thinking about, if you're going to like play Mozart, right? Like there's sheet music and there's notes and there's like it's timed and you learn that language. When you're learning a ballet, is it just like a series of like steps written down, like how long to hold the poses? Like what is that?
I think yeah, I would say that there are I'm not like on this side yet for yeah, so I don't know that much about their process like in terms of these people who pass on the steps. But from what I can tell is that yes, like they have these notebooks with I would assume like steps written down and then they deliver them audibly as well as like physically so that we can learn them. We also like we have videos for resources as well.
Mm.
So if there aren't copious notes or the video is more helpful because sometimes it is more helpful to just see the bodies in motion with the music instead of looking at written steps. It just kind of depends on where you are at in the learning of a ballet. But both, I would say both methods are helpful at different times. But I would say for ballets that have been around for many years and that were performed like originally years ago, like decades ago, those have probably a lot of notes. Whereas today, because we kind of rely on videos and technology more, we might have fewer notes, which could be a bad thing. But I don't know. I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but I do see like our leaders, they have notebooks and they tell us the exact counts to do on different things on. And then we also do consult videos for like cross referencing.
So cool to understand a little bit more of like what that behind the scenes experience is like. It's a really, I think, unique like language to pass on that you can't really, I don't know, but like you can't probably fully put to words, or clearly people have tried. But really special to find different ways to keep that knowledge alive and going. So I think it's a kind of a fun like transition point to go to like the production of a specific ballet, kind of what that timeline is like, and then like what your day to day is like, within that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the my day to day. We so at New York City Ballet we have different seasons, and we have about 4 or 5 different performance seasons, depending on how you look at it, where we perform for 4 to 6 weeks at a time, and then we have like an off season where we are either totally not dancing or we are rehearsing for what's to come. And and then within those two different kinds of seasons, like the performance season and then the either the totally resting season or the rehearsing season. We have a pretty set schedule of ballet class every morning at 10:30. Usually it's about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes. And then rehearsals immediately follow that around noon to 6 or 7 o'clock. If we have a performance that evening, the rehearsals will generally end for most people at about 5:30 or 6. We'll have a break to get ready for the show, about 2 hours. That time we usually like eat, put on makeup, warm up again, like warm up our bodies, and then we do the show. On in times when we are just rehearsing, we will have rehearsals from 12 to 7 with a 1 hour break in the middle and no show. But at the same, like, even though we're not doing a show, we are like really like hardcore learning new material, generating new steps. Um, so to kind of jump into the other question about like how long does it take to put together a ballet? Putting together a ballet that has never been performed before, that's created from scratch, takes a lot of hours. We often will rehearse for about, and this is a relatively quick process because New York City Ballet puts out material very quickly and we perform often. But with that said, we rehearse new ballets for about 4 to 6 weeks for maybe roughly 3 or 4 hours a day. And that's in addition to all the other rehearsals we are doing for like our long lineup of shows. So we like during a day, we probably generally rehearse as a company, we're probably rehearsing for like maybe 7 different ballets a day. But as an individual, I probably rehearse for like 2 to 3 ballets each day.
Mm.
Um, if that makes sense. It's kind of complicated, but all that I'm trying to say is it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of like brain and body power to like be fully present in all of it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many moving pieces. I'm kind of curious about like what your like team is like. So there's the performers that you dance with, but you know, I think it's really interesting with dance that like your body is your mechanism of doing the thing, right? Of making the art. So do you like have to work with the nutritionist? Do you have to do gym time, or like does practice get to be that? Like, is there homework involved in this?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there are actually a lot of extra elements. Like going to the gym or doing Pilates. A lot of people do gyrotonics or yoga. All of these things, you choose to do them. You don't have to do them, but our company does offer some I call it extracurricular exercise classes. Um, but they do offer extracurriculars, and I would say most people have some kind of regimen that they do in addition to ballet training. We also have physical therapy and massage on site. So those are also things um, like people that are involved with the company and also resources that we have. I do believe we have a nutritionist, although I don't really know much about him or her. Uh, we have like costume dressers. We have costume fittings. That's part of our job. We have people who make the costumes. We have a whole wardrobe department. We have someone who runs the point shoe room and the shoe room because the men also need ballet shoes. So that we will go there to get our shoes. Sewing shoes is another part of our job. We like individually sew each and every ribbon and elastic onto our point shoes, which also takes time.
Like each dancer does that for each of their shoes?
Yeah,
You know
so
how to
like
sew.
today, I'm gonna sew a pair of pointe shoes to prep for tomorrow. Usually I do that like most every day, maybe every other day, depending. Um, but yes, so we do that. We also have our rep directors. They're called repertory directors who deliver the information about the ballets that we perform. We have choreographers who are making new work come in. We have our artistic directors who are leading the company. We have like a marketing. I mean, if we get really into it, there's like a whole marketing department, which sometimes we also have to participate in media campaigns and do little social media shoots or interviews, things like that. So um, there are a lot of elements to New York City Ballet, and I think what is cool is that um, I mean every day is different, and every day you get to like try on a few different hats. Like it's at times it can be overwhelming because you're asked to not only dance but also you have a costume fitting, you have to sew point shoes. Um, Maybe you have an interview to do. Um, so it's so cool though. You get to collaborate with a lot of different people and make art that feels very full. Like it's not just about the dancers or the dancer. It's like you realize when you get out there that so many people have helped you to get to the stage, like all of the people I just mentioned and more. Um,
Yes.
so it's a big company. I'm sure other companies are similar in terms of like the parts that the moving parts that they have.
Mhm. It sounds so satisfying to get to that opening night, like knowing that all of those pieces have had to come together, like just so for it to be a success. Is there a favorite moment for you in that process? Like, I feel like for me, I would love like the costuming part would be so like lovely, but maybe it is the opening night or the closing night or just when the curtain opens. Like, is there something in there that's like particularly magical to you?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite I mean, this is silly, but one of my favorite parts is the bowing at the end because to me that's like you're like, okay, like I did my job. Um like it's so fun to have shared it with people. You I don't know, just to like I guess for me to be like kind of totally at peace
Mm.
and just being like, oh my goodness, I'm on stage and my friends are around me. I am in a pretty costume. Um, yeah, like at that time, my mind and my body can be like, oh, okay, like we did the hard work, even though it is fun and but it's still like work too. We have to
Yeah.
really we have to we care a lot about what we're doing, so we can't just do it willy nilly. But yeah, I love that moment where you kind of get to uh, just soak everything in and process it all.
Yes. So beautiful. And I believe you might have a photo of you in one of the costumes. Like maybe right now is like the perfect time to pull
Let
that
me see
up.
what is the best one. I mean, this is probably the most uh like this is probably the
Oh
most.
my gosh, my favorite.
So yeah, this is the Sugar Plum Fairy. Such a gorgeous costume for both people, and yeah, and yeah, this is yeah, this
It's
is the
completely stunning. Oh, and I love the sets of the Nutcracker are just amazing.
yeah, they're great. It's and the designs are by a woman named Karinska, who's very well known in the ballet community, especially at New York City Ballet, because she um, used color and like had this really great balance of textures and styles in a costume. She had a lot of play with her design. So anyway, that's what you see in the Nutcracker. Um, yeah.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for popping that up. I think it adds such good like context to what we're so excited about for anyone who hasn't seen it. So, um, my understanding is that, maybe ballerinas and performers have um, goal like ballets or, ones that they really want to perform in their career. Is that myth or fact? And like, can you speak a little bit to what that's like?
I think that's true. I mean, I would say that most artists have goals, that they're like, I'd love to do this. I'd love to accomplish this. If not now, then in the future. So yes, I'm certainly one of those people. I have a little list of ballets. I have a note in my on my phone that says ballets I'd like to do. And so I just kind of every now and then when I see ballets that New York City Ballet performs and watch them, and I'm not in the rehearsal process, I kind of just make a little note that, yeah, I'd really like to do that. Or even if I am, like, say, an understudy for a certain role, I just, yeah, take a little note and say, I'd really like to do that one day. And my list is not very long. I have a few roles that I would like to do, and I will be so satisfied. And even if I don't get to do them, I'll be okay.
Yes, that's so cool. My only like point of comparison is like the office world, right? And in that scenario, if there's a goal you have or a thing you want to achieve next or try next, you kind of work with your manager to like advocate for you to like, demonstrate the reasons that you're the great next person for this thing. Is any of that, does that carry true at all like through to the ballet world, or and are you auditioning each time there's another performance? What is that like?
We, it's not exactly the same, at least at New York City Ballet. I think a lot of how we are assessed is through our performances. I think through our rehearsals and our performances. So we at New York City Ballet are not constantly auditioning for roles, although I think like maybe in some small ways that does happen. But more often our directors are watching us like all the time because that's their part of their job,
Mhm.
and they pick and choose who will do certain roles, who will be elevated to the soloist or the principal rank. Um, at times you can advocate for yourself though, and I think that, at certain points in different people's careers or in different careers, you can say, hey, I have done all this for the company.
Mhm.
Can you offer me this, whatever it is? That I think that dialogue is possible to have, but we it's not as logistical as it might be in like a corporate setting.
Yeah, that's so cool, and really helpful context. So thank you. And before we veer too far from the, talking about like producing the ballet and stuff, I kind of want to understand. So, you're learning these specific like I'm going to say ballet like moves or choreography, right? But I imagine maybe I was listening before we got on here on the New York City Ballet's website. There's like audio of you while you're performing, kind of describing it, and you're talking about like your hands maybe pushing away cobwebs or something like that. So it seems like there's like an emotional element to how you think through the choreography and how your body thinks through it. Can you speak about like how you kind of get to that um, conclusion of what that's going to look like and feel like?
Yeah. Um, so when we're learning a ballet, we first learn the steps. And then I would say slowly but surely we add the artistry, like different layers of the artistry. And what helps us, at least what helps me a lot in understanding movement, is to think about imagery and relate it to other things in my life, in our lives. So yeah, like with certain hand gestures, like, yeah, the feeling of like pushing away cobwebs or searching, those kinds of images help color the movement, and it just there's something really natural about thinking about something you've seen and incorporating the feeling or the look into your body. And that like it happens slowly but surely over time and with careful coaching from the repertory directors in the front of the room. um, but yes, like there's at a certain point the technical and the artistic elements start to do this more and more and just become more fine tuned and um, yeah, so it's yeah, it depends on the roles, how exactly how you think about it, but the imagery does really help to understand movement better.
Yes. Are there and I'm like of course speaking as a complete novice, like naive to maybe exactly what I'm asking, but are there particular ways that you maybe stylize a role that are unique to Claire? Like that I could like the telltale sign that Claire is the sugar plum fairy right now kind of thing.
Um, huh. Well, I like to think about my hands a lot. Like I like to really like shape my hands. Often I feel like I'm playing. I think I like to have a spirit of play in
Mm.
a lot of the roles that I do. That doesn't always look like super smiley and bubbly. It might look more mysterious and inquisitive. But I think maybe I would say like you might notice like my hands and the way I like carve the space with them, or I'm really I like to I like using my arms and in hopefully beautiful ways because I'm not your trickster on the stage. Like I can't, I'm not doing a million spins
Mm.
or kicking my leg the highest, but I think what I can offer is like a really like well curated but also hopefully spontaneous carriage of my arms and like upper body. So
That's so beautiful. And I will say though, the clip that I watched was pretty trickster. Like you were doing this amazing thing with your legs over someone's head and like no one's heads were getting chopped off. So I was very impressed with your level of like very cool skills. Um, so we talked a bit about Balanchine and kind of like the more traditional like ballet superstars, but you have had this amazing opportunity to work with Justin Peck in your time at New York City Ballet. May you speak a bit about who he is and what that's been like?
yeah, Justin Peck, he was a soloist dancer with New York City Ballet, and while he was a soloist, he was also getting into choreography and making these really incredible works on initially students, especially at School of American Ballet, and then also New York City Ballet. And I am just a few years younger than him, I believe. So I entered the company right as he was maybe rising as a soloist and also rising as a choreographer. And he has a style. He's now like a choreographer. He's no longer a dancer in New York City Ballet. But as a choreographer, he incorporates a lot of different genres of dance, including um, tap, I would say kind of like hip hop, a little bit of modern, um, but also like there's a very great classicism to his movement too. And maybe a better word is structure as well, because he has a creative mind that understands like moving bodies and how they can create shapes and move in and out of them. Um, and then he also like similar to George Balanchine because that was his um, one of his dominant understandings of movement. Justin has a very specific and dynamic understanding of music, and that comes across in his style as well. But I think in terms of like our relationship, I like I feel fortunate that I entered the company right as he was becoming a choreographer. And I also understand that it is special that I went to a school where I got to do modern, and I I actually I took hip hop when I was like in middle school, and I did jazz early on. So I think just having an understanding of different styles as well as ballet has helped me to be a vessel for his creativity. And I've been really fortunate to be in a lot of his pieces. Um, and they're really fun to be a part of. There's like a great community element to whatever he creates, because he, like I said, he has a mind that thinks in terms of structure and how different people interact with one another, and how their shapes can uh, just create a really awesome dynamic ballet.
So cool. Just so great to see how that legacy of learning there and then choreographing there with this next troupe kind of carries on. It's very, very special. Um, so we alluded to a little bit before, New York City Ballet went through this big season of change when COVID hit. Only recently has there been like the reopening of the stage. Like I watched those little YouTube clips and it was like goosebumps for me, and I have nowhere near as close contact with it as you do. I wondered if we could dive a bit into, what 2020 was like for the ballet and for you, and the ways that you kind of continued your craft in that season.
Yes, wow. The year away was incredibly fruitful for me. I went home to North Carolina because I wanted more space and a little, uh, just like to escape Manhattan for a little while. And that turned out to be a great choice because the pandemic went on for a much longer time than many of us anticipated.
Mhm.
And so when I was there, I was taking ballet class with a teacher was on Zoom. I was in my parents' garage holding onto a treadmill. And my mom had an idea to have the neighbors come watch me dance in the garage. And then weeks later, this turned into an idea to have performances in the garage. So, um, like, I guess this is speaking for me personally, not necessarily like the company life, because our theaters were shut down. But I just transitioned into performing wherever I could, really. And the garage, my parents' garage, seemed to be a great place for it, and to bring the community, to have the community sit outside, to be spaced out, and watch art. So that was one thing that I personally did. I think in terms of more of the company, from the New York City Ballet's standpoint, they started to air lots of ballets digitally. Um, some like past recordings of ballets,
Mhm.
which was really beautiful to see these pieces. A lot of them I've been in them, so I couldn't really see what they looked like, um, or it was just nice to revisit an old memory. We made some new works during the past year. Um, New York City Ballet has a little subset called the New York Choreographic Institute, and I actually got to participate in that and create a ballet, which is, again, these are being a choreographer is a very new concept for me, and a great learning experience. But we created new works, we filmed them, we aired them digitally. There was also a new ballet that Kyle Abraham made for New York City Ballet that I got to be a part of, and we did a bubble residency, which is where we were all COVID tested, went to like a more isolated training area, created new movement, came back to our theater, filmed it in our theater, and then aired it digitally again. So a lot of what we did last year or during the pandemic year was um, like creating work in small settings and then airing it digitally. Um, but then on my own, I got to do some live in-person performances from my parents' garage. And in doing that, I learned how to um, like just run a show in so many ways, like in terms of organizing rehearsals, um, understanding music and what musicians need, lighting, like and on a very small scale, but
Yeah.
lighting and stage management, being your own PR agent and putting out media to advertise for your ballets.
Yes, it's legit though. I mean, it really is that exposure to roles that you weren't playing at New York City Ballet, where they were covered by these massive teams of people. Did it um, maybe heighten your curiosity about doing those things in your longer term, like expand kind of your consideration? I feel like 2020 changed so much about how we understand ourselves and others in the world. And like for you and for the institution, do you feel like that it has had a lasting impact of how things are done or what you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I think you like just said it perfectly. Like it really piqued my curiosity, and that's kind of it at the moment. Like in terms of like in doing these other side projects and creating shows. Um, yeah, I could see how doing that for a living would be really exciting and fruitful. And having been in the performance industry for a while, you understand the ins and the outs, and could transition to that. So yeah, I would be excited to pursue that in the future. I don't really know. It's hard for me to predict like where I will end up or where I want to end up at
Mm.
this moment, but I do know that those experiences during this past year were exciting and enjoyable. Um, so we'll see.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of not pigeonholing ourselves into a precise vision because everything can change. But it's kind of cool how you get to catalog these things of like, okay, I didn't realize this is something I could do and be happy with it. So that's really great to have that kind of expansive takeaway. And you do have a little clip from your garage. I think it's such a beautiful, intimate setting that is worthy of sharing. And I hope that there will be time in the future for some more garage shows. I will make my way to North Carolina for that reason.
Okay, here we go. Here it is.
It's so stunning and just what a wild experience for those kids too. They're going to remember that forever. So thank you so much for pulling it up for us here. So I am so inspired by the ways that you get out into the community and that you get excited about going out into the community. And the garage shows are really just one example. You have been part of, or maybe you have a podcast yourself and you have the Hear the Dance initiative. Can you speak about those other things and what kind of keeps motivating you to do that work?
Yeah. Gosh. These are again things that I never thought I would do, but I'm just saying yes to what's coming up. But I do host a podcast for New York City Ballet called The Rosin Box. I co-host it with my friend El Ron. We just talk about the ins and outs of New York City Ballet life. We interview different people in the company, get to know their positions. I also do a lecture series at a retirement home in Battery Park area of Manhattan. Talk about a specific ballet, bring some dancers and a musician to show live performances there. I show a lot of video clips as well. And then I do teach. I lead workshops, teach private ballet lessons, and I think there's so many reasons why. At this point, I have a substantial amount of knowledge about our craft that I just naturally want to share. But also, like people have come to me with these opportunities. I didn't ask for these positions necessarily, but I think people could tell that like they would be suited for me, or I would be suitable for them. Um, and like people need arts in their lives, and um, it's like there's a quote that C.S. Lewis has where he says like these things like friendship and art and philosophy aren't necessary for survival, but they give meaning to survival.
Mm.
And so I think that is why like sharing what I know about ballet is so important, and bringing it to the community. And that's because like it gives meaning to people's lives in so many ways. Like if I'm teaching people how to dance, or just teaching them that they can dance, that is so exciting, to like use your whole body and your mind and your soul to make movement. That's exciting for people who don't do that often. um, for the retired home, the retirement home, a lot of them don't have easy access and aren't as physically able to like just get in a car and drive somewhere, or like walk a lot of blocks to go see a show or witness art. So just coming to them and sharing the beauty um, of the art, it's so, yeah, it's just wonderful. And like I learned so much from them in all the elements, like, and with the podcast too, I learn a lot by just asking questions to the people in New York City Ballet. And it just reminds you that you're not alone. um there are so many important positions. There are so many beautiful stories that have yet to be heard or shared. um yeah, and I do really enjoy connecting with people beyond performances, because performances sometimes, like, you give the show, you hear applause, but you don't always like have that very personal encounter with the people supporting you. And so to do these other like gigs, you actually get to have very personal relationships, develop personal relationships with them.
It makes such a difference as an audience member as well. Like I would have Justin Peck's name would have meant nothing to me, but I heard him on a podcast when I was driving to Oklahoma last year, and and it does make it so much more human. And so I think it's such a great privilege for anyone who gets to hear your podcast and know you beyond seeing you perform. It's great to have all those layers of familiarity. And it's no surprise to me that you do a podcast because you're such a gracious guest. And so kind to be answering all of my questions. So I appreciate you doing that. But I love that you mentioned, art as having the capacity to like add meaning and enhance life and our appreciation for it, maybe, or, our ability to observe it and like take it in. I want to kind of narrow a little bit more into like ballet's capacity to do those things. Like, what do you think makes, ballet specifically matter? What continues to excite you about this specific like craft?
Wow. Well, I mean, I think at its core, the marriage of movement and music,
Mm.
especially like the very classical and ballet movements and the classical music. There's something so idealistic about that. And at the same time, it's not just that. It's just not, there's so much depth and emotion and rawness, even within something as like yeah, as ideal as classical ballet. But I just think overall that ballet, the marriage of the movement and the music, and also you could add like the costumes and the lighting and how you can be um, just so transformed by it, by being in it, but while also witnessing it. I think that that is why ballet is still important and relevant. I've heard from so many people who came back to the ballet after the whole pandemic year, and they were just like overjoyed, and they felt like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing different people's words, but like this like kind of pit in their heart was like all of a sudden full again because they had the beauty, um and the joy of the ballet. And so I think that, you know, life can be hard, but to have these ideals and to see them in the format of like bodies and souls on stage with music, which is so always so soulful, no matter what kind of music, um, like it's like life changing.
Truly, it's amazing. It's such a, there's so much history to this art form and it's withstood so much time. I think the other exciting part of last year is like in all of its heaviness, it made us think about more things like accessibility and how you reach those people in those senior homes and about who's in our audiences and who's on our stages. And are there elements in those categories that you're excited for the future of ballet regarding?
Oh, I mean, I've been excited. I'm so in favor of live performances, first of all. But what's cool is that like, I would say that technology has enabled us to like share dance with a wider range of audiences. But I mean, I'm kind of deviating a little bit from the
Go for
initial
it. There's no
question,
such thing.
but I think reaching just broader audiences is fantastic. Um, and yeah, you don't have to just be in New York City to see the New York City Ballet necessarily. You could probably encounter some kind of content that showcases the beauty of our art form. Um, but yeah, there's something special happening with ballet right now, and how it's shared. And I really do think though that technology has aided the like growing love of ballet amongst people who have never seen ballet,
Yes.
or had never seen ballet. Um,
So exciting to be on the cusp of these different waves, and it'll be cool to see even 10 years from now what that's like. So thank you for kind of going there with me and spitballing about it. um, I wondered if you had any advice or lessons you've learned along the way that you would like to share with other dancers or maybe people who just have a passion that they want to share with the world the way that you're doing.
Great question. Um, wow. I told someone this recently who asked a similar question, and I just said very simply, like, have courage and be patient. Um, because I just think that those are two qualities, even like virtues, two virtues that artists need, um, that all people really need, but especially to be an artist, a ballet dancer, a painter, a musician. You have to have courage to try. You have to have courage to like iron out the kinks. You have to have courage to perform or to display your work, in whatever capacity that is. And that's difficult to attain right off the bat, I think. Like, I think initially, maybe as young people in any field, you think, oh, I can totally do this. I know what I'm doing. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of layers of courage that have to be unpacked and achieved to do what we do. So anyway, have courage and be bold. Just go
Yes.
for it. Work hard, and then also be patient, because in the working hard, that means you're gonna have to like go slowly at times, progress more quickly than you desire to at times. Um, but just to give yourself the patience to know that like your journey as an artist or as any like craftsman is going to take time.
Yes, you're like speaking to my soul. I think these are really helpful words of wisdom for anybody, for myself included. I think they should be on like a needlepoint pillow or a tattoo or something somewhere that people can refer back to. Maybe just like even a post-it on our mirror in our bathrooms. So anyone who
Yeah.
does that, take a picture of it and share it back to Claire for credit. But I love that. And just as we're wrapping up, this last kind of two-part thing that I love to ask people is what you want people to leave knowing about you and your work. And secondly, like what are you personally looking forward to right now? And that can be something really small or really big, really random, really specific, doesn't matter.
Um, okay, what do I want people to know about my work? Um, wow. I'm just so grateful. I want people to know how how much of a gift it is, and how I don't want to. I hope that I don't want to take anything for granted. And I also think that with that, um I'm just so full of joy um to do it. And again, it's not always like the super smiley joy, but like on the inside, this I just realized that it's all a gift. um yeah, I don't that's kind of an interesting way to answer, but yeah. uh let's see. And what I'm really looking forward to, I'm really looking forward to premiering this new work by Justin Peck in the winter. It's a new ballet and it's going to be in sneakers. So it's going to be very fun.
What?
I don't know how much I can share about it, but I think it's going to be really great. And I'm really excited to be a part of it. And that premieres something like January 27th in 2022.
So exciting. Oh my God, sneakers. I can't even picture it, but I know it's going to be so lovely. And your joy and your gratitude like completely radiate. Like I can feel it here in Arkansas, straight from New York City. So I think everything you said was so genuine and so wonderful to get to hear on this platform with you. Claire, I'm so thankful as well for your time, for your wisdom that you shared, and just for your willingness to kind of share all the exciting stuff you've gotten to experience and learn from. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.